Secret Invasion Episode 4 is out. Gaia is alive. I called it. Once again, everyone on the internet called it, and I am not special. Let's talk. Okay, right out the gate, the show has kind of a weird trend. I kind of dig it. I'm not sure why. Of just starting the next episode after they leave off with an interesting little tidbit of information. The next episode starts and it's like, hey, here's what that meant. Here you go. Here's that. This is how that happened. So this episode, I believe, starts with Gaia waking up. She's got the extremis. There's a twist. Wasn't expecting that. Thought she was going to just not be dead because he didn't shoot her in like a vital part. Maybe he shot her in the heart and I missed that. Not the point. I really like that she's a Super Skrull. That adds so much to this, especially when we see her later talking with Talos and she's not on his side. Like, she's kind of her own agent. This character is just infinitely getting more interesting to me. I love watching her develop. I like that she has some powers now. She's got something special. And I kind of hope she's part of going up against Gravik in the end. I think that'd be really interesting. You all knew I was going to talk about pacing. I've talked about pacing for literally every episode. This feels like the end of the second act. Very happy about that. We've got 2 more episodes to kind of bring it out in the third act. The pacing on this show is so great. It's so good. And if you don't like it, I respect that, but I don't understand it because I'm really loving this show. This episode continues the trend of having literally every conversation that they choose to have in this show be completely interesting to me. So engaging. I love all of it. Specifically, Skrull Rhodey and Fury's wife, which I want to talk about Rhodey for a second.
My guess is that he probably got pulled right after Endgame. I just don't see them going, hey, this guy who's like best friend since the beginning with Iron Man, watched him die, but it really wasn't him, and so he's just like kind of pretending to be sad. Like, I just don't see that happening. That feels like such a weird call to me that I'm not sure that they do that. It would be a real twist if they did, but it just doesn't totally make sense that would happen unless they now go later and say, okay, he's been a Skrull for way before that, but he's like a good one. I don't know. I feel like there's a way to twist that, but I just don't really see that happening, and it feels kind of weird.
John's big, dumb, probably obvious theory corner is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you. Other interesting conversation, Fury and his wife. I love that. I love what they're doing with that character, kind of putting her, the idea that she shows up now should feel like, well, then why wasn't she here before? And that's kind of the point. It does, but it feels like why wasn't she here before, not because they're retconning her in, but because we're supposed to feel like Fury really probably should have mentioned her before or seen her before, which she's feeling that way. And he's probably feeling that way at least a little bit. So like that whole retconning her back in, it fits the story. That feeling of like, oh, we've missed so much time with this person we didn't even know. That's how you're supposed to feel. And it works great. It works really, really well in this show. I love their balance of dynamic. The shooting past each other is great. The follow-up line where Fury goes, I don't know if we should get divorced or renew our vows. Incredible line. Just, this show's genuinely well written most of the time. And that's really fun to watch because that hasn't always been true for some of the Marvel stuff. But then also tonally jumping from that fun little moment to her asking if she had stayed a Skrull, would he still love her? Him walking away and then kind of looking back and saying, I guess we'll never know. Like, that's just so much more nuanced than this show had to be. The Secret Invasion in the comics really is just a big punch up with some aliens. So I wasn't expecting to dig into character quite this much. But what they're doing with him feels new and it feels interesting, but it also feels pretty essential to Fury. Like, it doesn't feel like they're changing his character, other than, they mentioned that he's been different since the blip, but yeah, everyone in this universe has. That's been a whole kind of theme throughout the last phase, is that everybody's been affected by this mass traumatic event. Jumping straight into a completely different thought, Gravik is such a good villain. He's so good. He started out and I was like, yeah, he could be interesting. He could be, a guy to fight. He seems like somebody. He's definitely somebody. He's one of my favorite MCU villains, certainly one of my favorite villains of the shows. I love what they're doing with him. He is a villain that fits this show. He fits the scale of this show. It's supposed to be a worldwide threat without really being an Avengers threat. Just off the top of my head, if Fury was facing off with Caecilius from Doctor Strange, or the Abomination from The Incredible Hulk, like both of those are characters that fit their movie pretty well, I feel anyway. And if he was facing off against those characters, you'd kind of feel like, why is it Fury? Why does Fury have to be the one to do this? But this is such a close connection to Fury, and he's on the same level as Fury is, that he makes for an incredibly interesting villain who's legitimately evil. Like, he's a bad person. And I like that he's not a bad person in the way that the Flag Smashers were, where they're like, oh, you've totally got some really good points, and then they just blow up a hospital full of people just to prove that they're bad, because at some point I assume the writers kind of halfway through went, right, they're supposed to be the villains, and I'm kind of agreeing with them. Let's have them kill so many innocent people that you couldn't possibly agree with them. I like that that's not what these Skrulls are. Gravik's whole thing, he's not like a completely reasonable guy who's just trying to, find peace in the world, but at whatever cost. Like, he is fine with wiping out humanity. In fact, that's kind of what he wants. And that to me is a much better villain. You can have really interesting villains that are understandable, and they have in the MCU, but there's also something to be said for really enjoying just a bad dude, and Gravik is a bad dude. It kind of feels like the only guy, the only threat that could bring Nick Fury back. Not back to Earth from S.W.O.R.D., but back to being Fury, and you see that in this episode. This whole show has been telling us how beaten down he is, how completely different he is than he used to be, a thing I'm really interested in, but also I love that we're starting to see, like, he's back in it a little bit. In that fight toward the end of the episode, you see Fury. He's really starting to kind of swing back into who he is and reclaim that sense of self that he had. And I love watching that. That's a great character arc. I'm really interested in seeing that progress. Speaking of that final fight, holy shit. I was never expecting them to kill Talos. That was one, there's always people that you're like, yeah, on the hierarchy of people that are probably gonna die in this show or movie or whatever, you kind of start to make a ranking. He was not on that list as far as I was concerned. Talos has kind of always felt to me like just a guy who's gonna be in the Marvel Cinematic Universe until Ben Mendelsohn decides, I just don't want to keep doing this, and then they're gonna write him out. Where this feels like it was before he was tired of playing the character. His death is legitimately shocking to me. Like, that was a twist. I was not prepared for that. And it was really effective. It definitely hurt. I love when he gets hit and you start to see his Skrull side sort of pop out. Like, he phases through that slower than they normally would because he's just trying to hold on to his human image. So intrigued by that. That's such a great visual, him half Skrull, half human looking. I think that's incredible. And I'm legitimately sad to see him die. I'm sad to see him go. I loved what they were doing with that character. Overall, this episode was just incredible. It's one of my favorites of the series. I love seeing the Groot. He's doing the stretchy Groot thing, Gravik is. I was right about that. That's fun. Also, I watched a trailer for it. Apparently that was in the trailer. Really got to do my research before I start making claims. I really got to learn that lesson. But here we are. He does a stretchy Groot. Yeah, it was fun to see. It was definitely, I forgot that he had that, so when he did that, it was like, oh, right, right, he can do that, sure. I'm interested to see how the whole Frost Beast thing kind of comes into play, and Cold Obsidian. I don't know quite what that's going to look like, but it'll be fun to see what they do. I do think this show has the potential to be kind of an Andor of a show. Not just in tone, where this is kind of the adult MCU, where Andor was the adult Star Wars, both spy thrillers. All of that is true. But what I really mean is Andor, when it came out, not a lot of people saw it. I was one of those people who didn't really watch it, and then just kept hearing good things and good things and good things, and then they aired it like on ABC, and then all of that came together, and then it became like a well-renowned show. It became oh, this is what Star Wars can be. And I really hope that this becomes what Marvel can be. Like, this is a shining example, as far as I'm concerned, of the interesting thing about the MCU, which is you can have a martial arts movie with a dragon in Shang-Chi, and then a grounded sci-fi story about aliens in Secret Invasion. That's what made the first phase work so well, is you had Captain America, which was like a war serial. You had Iron Man, a techno thriller. You had Thor, which was like a big high fantasy thing. All of these things, they feel different, but they're in the same world. And I feel like Marvel has always had a pretty good handle on that, and this is just another great example of I want them to keep exploring different angles, different sides of the universe. Give me more Werewolf by Nights. Give me more of those kinds of things where you're like, I never saw that coming. Same with this show. I never expected it to be as good as I really think it is. This might be, at least up to this point, my favorite MCU show, and that's saying a lot because there's quite a few of them that I really enjoy. Thank you for watching this video and checking out my channel. If you want to, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, comment down below what you think of Secret Invasion so far, and where you hope they go in the last 2 episodes. Or don't do any of that. I am not your dad.